Reading and writing fill in the blanks, guided practice session. Let's have a look. So let's skim through this. A permanent diplomatic mission is typically known as an embassy, and the head of the mission is known as an ambassador or high commissioner. Embassy is a diplomatic, therefore the embassy operates in the chancery. The members of a diplomatic mission, all missions to the UN. All right, so this is something about embassies, diplomatic missions, etc., and the protocols and the things around that. So let's look at the first blank. The term embassy is commonly used also as a section of a building in which the work of the diplomatic mission is carried out. But strictly speaking, it is the diplomatic dash itself that is the embassy. So diplomatic dash. So what we need a noun. Diplomatic, that is an adjective. So which of these can be a noun here? Legislation, publication can be, or delegation can be, right? So it is a diplomatic delegation, because the delegation, it refers to the group of representatives. So it's not just the building which is an embassy, but it is the diplomatic representation or the people or the group which itself is the embassy, while the office space and diplomatic work done is called the chancery. All right, the next blank. The members of a diplomatic mission can reside within or outside the building that holds the mission's chancery, and the private residences enjoy the same rights as the premises of the mission as regards inviolability and dash. So we need a noun, so which goes along with inviolability. And that is here, what is that those residences enjoy? They enjoy security or protection. So that's the word here. The next blank, it's about missions to the European Union are known as permanent representations, and the head of such a mission is dash, both a permanent representative and ambassador. So what we need here, we need an adverb to describe the usual or common status of this head of state, or head of a mission, or who is both a permanent representative and an ambassador. And that adverb is typically. So typically, it means that in the usual practice or it's customary. And when you also look at the other words there, is temporary, typically, justifiably, solely. So justifiably and solely, they are correct from a grammar perspective, but it's only typically, because we're talking about something which is usual practice. And now the last option, some countries have more dash naming for their missions and stuff. So we need an adjective which tells us what type of naming, have more specific or more particular naming for their missions and stuff. Because then they give examples of what these kind of namings be, such as for a Vatican mission or under the role of Gaddafi. So what were the names given to Libya's missions? So the word here is some countries have particular meaning. So here are all the correct answers for you. Let's go to the next question. A unique feature of Australia's fauna is the relative dash of native placental mammals, dominance, etc., etc. Australian raven, koala, emu, the birds of New Zealand, etc. So there's something about the fauna, the animals, the birds in Australia and New Zealand. So the paragraph tells us something about that. So now let's look at the first blank. A unique feature of Australia's fauna is the relative dash of native placental mammals. So we need a noun. Relative is an adjective. We need a noun. Relative inclination, bias, administration, or scarcity. So scarcity, relative scarcity means in terms of, because they're talking about dominance of other group of mammals. So in proportion to them, in comparison to them, the native placental mammals, they are scarce. So that's why relative scarcity. So see why it is, you understand why it is important to read the whole sentence properly. The next one, the guana is a dash lizard native to the Australian mankind. So we need an adjective that can describe the type of lizard. Predatory, analytical, arbitrary, consultative. So now all of them can be adjectives, but here in the context of a lizard, of an animal, only predatory. So which animals that prey on other animals, eat other animals. So that makes sense. And we are not talking of consultant or professor. So the other words, that's why they do not make sense here. The next one, the birds of New Zealand evolved into an avian fauna that included a large number of dash species. So again, we need an adjective. What can describe this species? Empirical, derivative, deductive, or endemic. The correct word here, logically, is endemic. So it means species that are native of that place, which can only be found there. And now let's go to the next blank, that the bird song was dash. Okay. Captain James Cook arrived in the 770s and noted that the bird song was dash. So we need an adjective to describe the bird song, and that is, it was deafening. Means the bird song, it was so loud, the noise that the birds were making was so loud. So deafening is the correct word. And the last, some of the more well-known and dash bird species in the New Zealand are etc. etc. Most well-known and dash. So something which goes with well-known. Simulated, stimulated, emergent, or distinctive. The correct option? Yes, I think you have guessed it. Distinctive, distinguished from others. And he's the author of the text is also giving us examples. So most well-known and have their own distinction. Species such as kiwi, kea, etc. So the correct option, distinctive here. And that's our answer. Ready for the next question? Here we are. Let's quickly skim through. In addition to being physically and dash comfortable, the patient will want expected to get test results in a nurse's role. These are well within the scope of nursing practice. So the text is about patients, their expectations, a nurse's role, what the nurses are expected to do. So something around that. So with that information, let's begin the first blank. In addition to being physically and dash comfortable. So physically comfortable, and what can be another type of comfort? Or, yep, that can be economically comfortable, emotionally comfortable, theoretically comfortable, or critically comfortable. So economically comfortable, yes, that is something, yeah, people would want to feel economically comfortable, but theoretically and critically doesn't make any sense. And considering that we are talking about a patient, the comfort that the patient will seek, and that goes better with physically, is emotionally comfortable. So that's the option there. The next blank, while there are certain things that are not dash in a nurse's role to talk about, such as, okay, so some things that are not included in a nurse's role, because after that, they're giving examples such as delivering bad news or dash. So the word that has a similar meaning, warranted, that they are not expected, or something that is not expected of a nurse's role or warranted in a nurse's role. After that, the option delivering bad news or a dash prognosis. So we need an adjective to go with prognosis, a type of prognosis, tricky, thermal, tribal, or terminal. Terminal, which means something that is expected to lead to death. So that's the bad news. And the nurses, they're not expected to talk about that. The next one, and these are well within the scope of nursing practice and involve teaching and educating patient about the disease process, dash, and outcomes. So we need a list here, things that are included in nursing practice within the nurse's role. So one of them is talking to the patient, educating the patient about the disease process, the outcomes, and what else can be interjections, intervals, interventions, or intermissions. Intervention. So intervention, it refers to the procedure or the approach that is being taken for treatment. So interventions, you would have come across this term medical intervention. So that's where this comes from. The last option now, again, if a nurse is asked a question that they do not know the answer to, they should tell the patient dash that they do not know. So what we need an adverb here, that how should they speak? They should speak honestly. That's how you tell. And yep, that's the correct option here. You can also say that should tell the patient directly that they do not know. But the fact, that this is something that they are not aware of. So honestly is the more appropriate option here. Let's go to the final question in this practice session. Hypermobile travelers are highly mobile individuals who take frequent trips. They account for a large share of the overall kilometers. Concerns over hypermobility apply to several modes. The environmental impact effects. All right, so the passage is about, I think, about travel and some specific types of travel and travelers who travel a lot. So the impact of that on maybe the environment. Let's look at the first option. Hypermobile travelers are highly mobile individuals who take frequent trips, often over great distances. They account for a large share of the overall kilometers dash, especially by air. So again, this describes an action that is taken by these travelers. So what it can be? traveled, traversed, monitored, or ran. So we're talking of travelers, we're talking of kilometers. So the correct option is travel. Overall kilometers traveled by these travelers, especially by air. The next option, the next blank. Although concerns over hypermobility apply to several modes of transport, the environmental impact of dash and especially its have brought particular focus on flying. So a mode of, they're talking of modes of transport and the environmental impact of a specific mode of transport, impact of aviation. So though you travel by airplane and you travel in air, but it's actually, it refers to aviation. The overall air travel, that's referred to as aviation. So that's why it's the correct option. The next blank, among the reasons for this focus is that these emissions, because they are made at high altitude, have a climate impact that is commonly estimated to be 2.7 higher than the same dash if made at ground level. So we're talking about something and then we are saying if the same dash. So what are we talking about? We're talking about emissions. And if the same emissions, they are made at ground level, they have less impact. So basically we have to pick a noun so that we can be consistent. Consistently refer to the subject of the sentence, which is emissions. All right, the next option. This results in the twin effects of wider and dash regions of social activity. Wider and dash regions. So what can go with wider? Bigger here, because we are talking about a region. Twin effects of wider and bigger regions of social activity around each person. So we can't say wider and shallower or wider and slower. They sort of contradict. We're talking about twin effects. So think they have to be similar. So that's why we go with bigger. And final, which can be seen as a form of virtual mobility and a dash of the social and physical environment brought about by the high-speed traffic. So something that the high-speed traffic does to the social and physical environment. Detection, degradation, or dejection. So we need a noun and degradation makes sense here. Right? It refers to the process of something being diminished in quality. And here we are talking about that the decrease in quality of the social and physical environment caused by the high-speed traffic. So these are your options. Feel free to spend more time analyzing the correct options and in your mind, make sure that you understand why we picked those correct options.